Okay, it's official. We've started the Lead Like a Legend webinar, and I'm so thrilled to have you here on the call today to share with you a really beautiful model that transformed the way that I was showing up in leadership to develop my confidence and my clarity around leadership so that I could have more peace in my life, so that I could know with certainty that there was a system that I was following, and also understand how to connect and develop others. So I'm going to set a couple of standards for today because I love hearing your input. I love hearing what you're learning. So to have your typing fingers ready to type into the chat what it is that you're taking away, and I'll ask some questions along the way, and there will be some opportunities as well to come off mute and share what it is that you would like to add to the room. I'm also a very excitable person, and sometimes I might speak a little bit too fast, so I apologize in advance. And I would love to be able to share as much of my knowledge with you today. So if we have gone too fast or there's something that you need to clarify, please stop me, and I'm more than happy to help you there. Sometimes I swear as well. That's a problem for people. Just get very expressive, and also really love it when people are engaging and really taking away from this webinar. So is that a pretty good standard set for today? Awesome. And for those of you that don't have your camera on, please, this is an opportunity for you to be able to share your wisdom, and we'd love to see your beautiful faces as well. So just to give you a brief overview of the critical alignment model and what we're going to be diving into today, we're going to be talking about a frame of thinking that's going to help you as a leader to not only to organize your thoughts, but to develop your behavior. And I just want to check, did everyone get the link for the workbook from today? And if not, I will drop that in the chat. So this workbook, it's not to fully, to completely finish today. Quite often people really want to finish it during the webinar, but it's a resource for you to be able to write down some notes, and also to continue on. Sorry, I can't talk and multitask at the same time. Here we go, we're adding a file. There we go, we're adding a file. For you to be able to use the critical alignment model to already start your own process of how what you're learning today can apply. So let me just see here, Lead Like a Legend workbook. Okay. Technical glitch. 1 second. Workbook. There we go. The joys of technology, just as we were talking about. How do you navigate change? Well, apparently we can do it. Oh, we can do it. Fantastic. There we are. Yes. Okay, so you can go ahead and open that link, and I just ask that you're not too focused on it. If it's something that you take away from today, please feel free to fill it in, but that your eyes are also on the screen and on the webinar. So just so that we know who is in the room today, I'd love you to type into the chat who you are, what leadership position you are in, and also whereabouts you're tuning in from. So if you can go ahead and do that now, that would be wonderful. I know I've connected with a few of you, but just understanding for those of you who are here, who else is learning these leadership skills. So wonderful that you are all valuing your own growth, and also to be constantly learning is a leadership trait, and the most important one. You can see some furiously typing. Hi, James, by the way. Nice to meet you. So Lloyd said he's a supply chain manager in Auckland. Well done, Lloyd. Amazing to see you here. Fionn said that she's an HR manager from Tauranga. Beautiful. Nice to have you there, Fionn. And James, wonderful James, he works as a minister, and he's really helping to develop specifically men in their relationships, and he's manager of a Crown agency in Palmerston North. Amazing. And Fleur, she said that she's based in Auckland, group financial controller of a property investment company. And Maria from Auckland, who's undertaking a GM role in Australia. Awesome. Well, it looks like you're all in the right room, so let's get into it. So talking about the critical alignment model, and what it is it's starting with our environment. So our environment is things like our outcomes. What it is, what kind of environment do we want to create for ourselves and for our team? The next part is creating a structure. So once we've got the environment really clear, what kind of structure can we develop that is going to get us there? The next part is, how do we implement that? What kind of habits do we need to create on a daily basis that's going to get us to effectively execute the structure that's going to get us to our outcomes? And then, of course, the last part is people. And people is primarily how to give feedback, how to develop people, and how to mentor them. So I'd love to know from you, who here is looking to have more confidence within themselves as a leader? Raise your hand, maybe type something in the chat. Amazing. Nice one, Lloyd. And who here is wanting to build the confidence to have those one-on-one conversations with their team members? Fantastic. Great. So I'm very excited to share with you this model today, because we're going to be covering a lot. And so I'd love to dive into the environment. So the environment is primarily knowing what our outcomes are, and also knowing what our purpose is. And our purpose can be our own personal purpose, or also the purpose of the organization. So I wonder, what do you think is the benefit of you having a really clear outcome for your team? Just typing into the chat, what kind of advantages do you think they get when you're really clear on your outcomes? Because a lot of the times the businesses are doing the daily things and they don't get really clear on their direction. Yeah, nice one, Fleur. Definitely direction. Transparency and alignment to common goals. Well said, Lloyd. Exactly. All on the same bus. Exactly. Yeah, love that. And then clarity and direction, what we're here for. Exactly. So when you've got those big picture goals, you've got an understanding of what you're there to achieve, then everyone can be on the same bus and everybody's heading in the same direction. And quite often when there's no direction, you've got little silos of people thinking that they know where the organization is heading, when actually it's creating so much more chaos because there's not an aligned team. Maria also shared that they feel accomplished and motivated. Absolutely. If you don't know where you're going, you don't know where you've been, and therefore cannot acknowledge your process. Another part to your environment is your purpose. And your purpose as a leader is so vital. Heart-centered, purpose-driven leadership is what creates sustainable energy. And I'll share with you a story. Has anyone been to the Sistine Chapel in Italy? It's nice one, Fionn. It's a work of art. It's so beautiful. And when I was there, this half Scottish, half Italian girl, she was our tour guide. What a mix. And she shared with us that the Sistine Chapel was created by two different types of people. Because there was so much work that went into it, there was always tradies all around doing the painting in the building. And there was a man on site one day, and he went up to one of the men who was painting it, and he said, "What are you doing here?" And the guy said, "Well, I'm painting the Sistine Chapel." And he said, okay. And then he went on to ask another man, and he was also painting. And he said, excuse me, sir, what are you doing here? And he said, I'm doing the work of God. So having a real purpose, going from the man who was just painting to the man who felt like he was so connected to the mission, so connected to the purpose of what he was doing, which one do you think had more sustainable energy? And which one do you think was more engaged? The man with the purpose, the man with the mission. So I'd love to know from you, what are you taking away from that in terms of your own leadership? Who is clear on what their own purpose and mission is in leadership? Kind of, a little bit? Yeah. Awesome. And that's okay, because it's a journey as well to find out what it is that is your purpose. And another example of this is, what is the purpose of an organization? So what is the why behind that organization? And quite often the why is the pain that the organization is trying to help mitigate. So for an example, if you've got a cleaner, she's working for a cleaning company, and she doesn't feel that that cleaning company has a very high standard or that they have very good customer service. And the pain was that the customers were always let down, and she hated seeing customers let down. So she leaves that company to start her own company, and her purpose is to help have the highest customer service reviews, or to have the highest standard that she can have. So can everyone intuit how she went from having a pain and she created a business around a purpose? So that's our business purpose. Cool, everyone with me so far? Loving it? Great. Another example of this is really interesting. I've got a client who lives in the Marlborough Sounds, and he owns a mussel farming business. And if you think it's hard to find staff in the main centres in New Zealand, try the Marlborough Sounds. And he gets these big burly men show up on his doorstep. Oh, I'm looking for a job. And they really are lost. They don't really know what they're up to, and they just need a job. And so I was working with my client who was developing his leadership skills. And when we unpacked what he was there to achieve, he told me, well, the reason why I really wanted to buy this business was to help these men transform, because they came to him in various stages in their development journey, and they're lost and they need direction. So we came up with this saying, and the saying was, muscles are just the mechanism. And that radically transformed the culture of the company, because everybody that came to the company realized that it wasn't about muscles at all. It was about the transformation that the team went through. And now he has a super engaged team, and they're also broing each other out, helping each other as bros to be able to transform. So there's just a couple of examples of how having a really clear purpose and diving into the why of your organization can help you as a leader to transform the lives of your team and also for yourself. So how do we do this? How do we find our own direction and our purpose? And the first part, our own direction, and that is setting our long-term goals. So knowing, what is that big, hairy, curly 10-year plan? And being able to, you don't have to know, nobody knows, but at least you've got an idea of where the business is heading, where you are heading, so that you can make decisions that are in line with that outcome. The next part is understanding your purpose. And as leaders, we do this by building our self-awareness and also taking time to work on the big picture of the business and understanding what is the purpose of the organization, why it exists, and then communicating that with the team. So I'd love to hear who has a comment, any questions, or what are you taking away from what I just said that's significant? You can come off mute or you can put it in the chat. I'd love for you to share. Do you have an example of that in your own organization or in your own life of it really making the difference? You can see Camilla's ready to type there. And maybe for those of you that are waiting, thinking about what are the consequences of not having a clear purpose? What is it that an organization needs to be able to have a really clear purpose?
If I can just share, Daniela, it's just too hard typing.
Yeah, go for it, James.
So I think, our mission for Men Ministry is started about filling that need in terms of really serving our community during the COVID space. We were able to do that, and that's been a 2 to 3 year process. But we've needed to adjust and to really adapt to the changing needs and where our organization needs to be. So, some of what you're bringing forward today is really about revisioning where we are and where we're going. It's still that same overall vision about transforming men and to be good role models and contributors in the community. But it's also, I think for me, my failing has been to really rebuild the vision with the team and really get them to come back to the page of this is why we're here, and show them what that new vision is for the times that we're in. So this has been really stimulating to actually get me thinking about what that space is and how that looks. The benefit of that Mussel Farm story is, obviously that guy was doing the same kind of thing, and mussels are just good eating as well, so it's double the bonus.
Yeah, thank you so much, James. And I love what you've just shared about revisioning, because quite often there is a vision, and especially after COVID or going through some kind of major change, to check in with that vision and make sure that you're still showing up congruently with that. So Julie's just shared, for me, it's about ensuring that I link my own purpose to the organization and creating clarity on how we all link back to that. Really, really well said, Julie. And that's one of the main emotional drivers when you're connected to the purpose of the organization. When you are in bed in the morning and you just can't be bothered to get up, and if you're connected to the organization in an emotional way because you truly care about it, then it will give you even more drive and sustainable energy. Camilla also shared for our company, it's about giving back to the community, and it's just me realigning with that and how it fits with my values and our purpose. Yes, exactly. Love how you brought values in there. Values is also part of the environment, but we don't quite have time to dive deep into values today, but it's definitely part of creating that culture and those overall outcomes. Amazing. So does anyone else have any comments, any more questions, or are we all good to move on? Happy to move on? Let's do it. So the next part is structure. And structure is all about the way that we work back from the vision. There's a really great saying, 1 hour of planning beats 10 hours of doing. And I know this for myself. I used to be such a great doer. I'm a dynamo, haven't you noticed? Just straight into it. But the minute I learned to pause, step back and align my energy with the vision, because I had a structure, it completely transformed the way that I showed up within my business and also in my thinking. Because structure is not only for our teams an easy pathway to follow, but it's also for ourselves to not have such chaotic thoughts, because we've planned accordingly and we help ourselves to have certainty because we've taken the time to plan. So what do you think are the consequences of not having structure within your business or within your mind? What are some of the effects that it has on your team? Feel free to come off mute or type it into the chat. Because a lot of people think that they have really good structure, but especially business owners, and I don't know if you've noticed this, they have all of the structure in their mind, and that doesn't help anyone to be able to follow them. So Fleur said, yeah, the consequence is waywardness. Exactly. Or as an example, you've got Jimmy doing it this way and Jack doing it this way. Who's right? If there's no structure, people are going to take it upon themselves to develop a system anyway. And quite often that's where a lot of conflict comes into organizations, because you've got Jimmy and Jack competing for who's right. And nobody consciously created that. Camilla also said that one seems to be the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff and the other one being reactive. Exactly. So having a structure means that we can be less reactive because there's a plan. A danger, though, with having a plan is that everybody always wants to have their ducks in a row. And if you're a really structured person and you're a leader and you've got too much structure, then you are going to be waiting for certainty to show up before you take action. And we as humans, we can handle the ambiguous and the complex, but we need to build that trust with ourselves. So yes, having a structure is very key to leadership, and also not being too fixed within that structure, because that's going to stop us from potentially taking opportunities or to be able to learn something new. So you can also do what feels right if you've taken the time to pause and see how that could potentially work for you. Make sense? Fantastic. So what are we talking about with structure? Structure is, for example, you've got SOPs, standard operating procedures. You've got KPIs. These are things that help your team members to know what it is that they're aiming for. For yourself, in your own mind, structure is having 90-day goals, having a yearly goal, and then turning it into a 6-month goal, and then a 3-month goal, and then creating your action plan. And the real benefit to having the structure is that when you've got it there, you don't have to think about all of the rest of the 6-month plan, and you're just focusing on the 3-month plan, because you know that you've taken the time to create that, and your focus becomes on what you're doing here right now. The other part to this is that you want to train your team to start being proactive about creating systems. And how you do that is to develop a mentality where everybody's asking themselves, am I doing this more than once? Because if you're doing it more than once, there needs to be a system. And that is the key to being able to use the team to evolve, because everybody is being proactive about creating systems, updating SOPs, challenging KPIs, and they're encouraged to be able to keep the system growing rather than the system staying stagnant. Making sense? Cool. So what is significant about what you've just heard that you know that you need to take away either in your own life or within your business? What kind of key takeaways have you written down that you want to commit to yourself taking action going forward? Feel free to come off mute or type something in the chat. There's a couple of new people that have just come onto the call. I'd love if you have a camera, if you could please turn that on, that would be fantastic. I can see Nikita there, Manish. Beautiful to see you here on the call today. And just make sure when you're typing in the chat that you type to everybody. I'm getting a couple of private messages and nobody else can see those messages. So James, he said that engagement of the team in developing the systems and taking ownership in the mahi. Yeah, James, exactly. And I know for you, James, specifically, you're working with volunteers, and quite often volunteers, because they're just there to volunteer, they don't feel empowered to be able to change the system. So it's really changing that narrative to, you know, you are part of this, and if you have another way of doing it, I'd really like to know. Awesome, we've got a couple of thumbs up there. Thanks everyone for contributing. I really do appreciate it. I know we're all managers and leaders in our own roles, and I'm sure that a lot of you have so much experience and wisdom to bring to the table today. And it's really interesting with systems, because a lot of people that I work with, my clients, they all say, oh yeah, I've got a system in place for that. But their system hasn't been revisited, or their system isn't helping them to be able to move forward. And oh, I just got a phone call, sorry. Their system isn't helping them to move forward. So creating a big picture plan to revisit these systems, and not just using the systems just because they worked once.
I wanted to share something, Danny, if you don't
go
mind.
for it.
In healthcare, we have annual programs that are the whole platform, the whole quality assurance program. And it's broken down into the activities required of the standards for the certifications, on a monthly basis, on a fortnightly, on a weekly, and quarterly. So that helps the whole team come together to actually know what's coming up, what is the activity that's coming up, and how to prepare for that. So it's what we call our annual quality assurance program, and it's absolutely a game changer. I have seen quite a bit of facilities or organizations that still are working on having that, but if one would have one, that is great. And the systems in healthcare would constitute how often you have meetings and hub meetings, and how often education opportunities are offered, how what are the auditing requirements for certification, any quality assurance initiatives for the year or for the
I'm just going to pause you for a second, Maria. I love what you're sharing, and I would love to just hear how that benefits you, or what it is that you're taking away that isn't already in place. Because it's amazing that it has that, but is there something that you've taken away from the structure that you would like to add?
It really does give direction for myself and for the team, and we have a feeling of being one to achieve something.
Absolutely.
We're highly more. It helps a lot in motivating everyone to come together as a team.
Absolutely.
So, and also meeting expectations and performing the best we can as a team, because we can justify what those areas we need to work on or whatnot has not been achieved. And as a leader, it is quite good to lead the team and orchestrate those events, and they feel all motivated.
Yeah, well said. Thank you so much for sharing, Maria. And Fion's just shared here in the chat, we've recently introduced the Kaizen method of looking at our processes and procedures with an aim of reducing wasted time to be more efficient. Yes, that's fantastic. So for those of you that don't know about Kaizen, it's a Japanese proverb, I think, that was introduced by Toyota, who talked about constant and never-ending improvement, and that's how they developed the business that they have today, by continuously checking those processes and seeing how they can be more efficient, and revisiting what the systems are so that they are never falling behind. Thanks for sharing that, Fiona. Beautiful. So if everybody is ready, we're going to go straight into implementation. But before we do that, if anyone needs to stand up and have a wiggle, or maybe just wave at the camera, just a little bit of movement because it's lunchtime, maybe a big stretch, a little bit of a wiggle. There we go. Diving into the second part, everyone's doing so well. I know I really, I admire that you're here on your lunch hour to be able to spend time. Maria's showing us her beautiful dog, getting some oxytocin in the system. I wish I had a dog like that. He's so cute, Maria. Beautiful. Okay, awesome. Implementation, let's do this. And implementation is not just about the doing, but implementation is really about the small steps that come from our structure and our systems that we like to call habits. It's also things like our decisions that we have to make, but it's doing the doing. So I wonder if someone can put in the chat and share with me, what are some of the challenges that people have when doing the doing, when showing up to implement? What have you noticed about your team members, for example, when you say to them, okay, go away and do that? What are some of the responses that you get or the challenges that people have in taking action? Please come off mute and share your experience. Or something where you've got a specific example of a team member that you've tried to motivate them and maybe they haven't been able to take action. Or potentially it's for yourself. If you know that you've got to do something, I know for myself, before I learned about my own internal world and understanding myself on a deeper level, I always used to shy away from doing the important things and procrastinate. And my house was never cleaner, I swear to God. And procrastination is stopping us from taking action. And that's a very common pattern in a lot of people. So does anyone have any examples, or are you happy for me to carry on?
I can contribute, actually. Can you hear me?
Yes, go for it, Fleur.
Oh, cool. Something I find quite often, I've fallen victim to this as well, and I see it with my team, is there might be many tasks that need to be done at once, and say I might have a conversation with a certain team member and say these things, blah, 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 these are priorities. Within the priorities, there's a set of smaller tasks, some more important than others, in order to achieve just one specific task. And I find people always go for the smaller, easier ones, which don't actually contribute to getting priority number one done as fast and as efficient as possible. Mm. So yeah, there's the whole issue of the more important things not being prioritized over the less important things in order to get the one task done. Yeah, and it's very frustrating.
Exactly, and that's a prime example. You as the leader, you understand that to do the most important tasks that going to achieve a lot more, but then handing that over and noticing people doing the easy tasks because the big tasks, they're procrastinating on them, or for some reason they can't take action on them. Maybe there's some fear there, maybe they don't know how to do it and they're not willing to ask. There's all of these elements. And what I notice about taking action is people's fear of the unknown, or people who are trying to get it right. They're really trying to do the best that they can for you as the leader because they want that acknowledgement. They're trying to get it right, but they're not able to take the risk in trying it and be okay with that. And I'll share
what I find. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
What I find is that even if I'll set a task or a deadline or something, and I'm saying, this is where you need to come to, this is what I want, and you need to come to here. It's funny because some team members will come to here, like not enough. And I just kind of put that down to, well, maybe they don't know what they're doing or fear or just actually lazy. or some people actually go to here and do too much, like much more than what I've said and much more than actually what I even need. And it's because they're trying to do too much of a good job, but it's that whole excellence over perfectionism. You know, they're going for the perfectionism thing instead of just like, let's get the job done. And that's the excellent part.
Yeah,
So
really
yeah.
well said. And I know that that especially as a leader, you've got your own standards and, you know, your time versus quality, reference, but quite often people who are going over and above are using a lot of time that isn't dedicated to that, and the people below who are not having the standard high enough. So it's a really great point. And I guess the main thing as a leader, what we can do is to communicate those standards, but also to be able to create an environment where people can take those risks. And I know this is specifically challenging in healthcare, Maria, so take this with a grain of salt when it's people's lives at risk. And I also know that creating an environment where people are able to take risks and try give things a go without needing to get it perfect, that is also a really good indicator that the leader is helping encourage them to take action regardless. And one of the stories that I have that really resonated with me was an investment banker in the US. He was doing some trades and some investments, and he did a trade for $1 million that ended up going belly up. Basically, it failed. And he went into his boss's office and he had his head down low and he had his resignation letter there, and he said, oh, here you go, here's my resignation letter. And the boss said, why are you resigning? And he said, well, I've just lost the company $1 million and I feel so bad, and here's my resignation letter. And the boss said to him, why would I accept this? Because I've just spent $1 million educating you. And it's really that attitude that, yes, people bugger up all the time, but how they really learn that lesson of what not to do 10 times harder than if they had done it right in the first place. So it's an attitude, it's an environment that we create that allow people to be able to take action and not need to have all the information, but learn along the way. Making sense? Awesome. And another part to this is because people are waiting for clarity to show up, they end up stagnating. And you can imagine just like a pond, if you've got stagnant water that's sitting still, it's murky. But as soon as the water starts to run, then the water becomes clear. And it's the same thing with taking action. It's taking small steps that are going to fuel that trust that you're building within yourself, and then eventually the water will run clear. Eventually it will be easier to start taking action. So how we can do this with our team members is to give them feedback of what you're noticing. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And also to be able to create really small habits for them to be able to start taking that action and building the trust within themselves. And we do that by putting one foot in front of the other and helping those team members who potentially are not willing to put themselves out there, helping them to lean into the fears and put themselves out there regardless. So I'd love to know, what is significant to you about that? And what are you taking away from being able to help your team members implement? Maria, would you like to share? I can see that you're off mute there.
Oh, accidentally, but anyways, I like what you said about failure, and I for one, I'm happy to share with you guys. But I recently lost my my company. I'm an entrepreneur, and I just take it as the most expensive learning experience. But in New Zealand, I find that there's a lot of judgments here about that sort of things, those sort of things. they I don't know, it's just they're much more critical, I suppose. And there's not a lot of opportunities to bounce back from, to be honest. And so that is why if I had another chance at it, I would have stayed in New Zealand, but unfortunately there's not a lot. So I'm moving on and finding my new life elsewhere, as a renewed in with renewal of spirits, I suppose, from that broken hearted experience. But I don't know what would take from it. I suppose if people can look at entrepreneurship in New Zealand as a constant learning experience. I mean, I'm never going to be the same after losing $1 million company. You're never going to be the same, and the learning from that is making it's such a significant part of anyone to take on board with financial control and all that operational management. Yeah, so that's all I can say.
Thank you, Maria.
Everyone gets encouraged to be like that, yeah, because it's
thank
not
you
all
for sharing
in the real world.
That sucks. Honestly, I'm really, really heartfelt for you that it's, like you said, the biggest roller coaster and learning curve for you. And just want to acknowledge you for your attitude and approach right now, that you have been able to see it as a learning and that you've moved on so fast. Really, really well done, Maria.
Thank you.
So moving into people, because people is what we're all here to develop our team members and to be able to understand how we can get them to step into their potential and get to the next level. So I'm really curious, what is your approach to feedback? What is your mindset around that? If you'd like to share that in the chat, I'd really like to understand, because Maria's just also mentioned, attitude towards failure in New Zealand, and that is part of the tall poppy syndrome. It's part of some of the cultural narratives that happen in New Zealand because of the way that our society was formed. And it also really impacts the way that we experience feedback, because it's quite often seen as criticism. Now, I lived in Germany and the Netherlands for a couple of years, and there they just tell it to you straight. And in New Zealand, they fluff around the bush, and that's definitely something that I've noticed as a common trait for entrepreneurs and business leaders that I work with, the ability to give feedback in a way that is loving and caring and helps the person to ignite themselves, rather than it being seen as criticism and cutting them down. So Fionn just shared that. Yeah, appreciate you sharing, Maria. All the best with your new journey. Lovely.
At what point, though, do you need to be loving and caring and guide them versus just like, okay, well, actually, you need to toughen up. This is a lesson you need to learn, or this is a job you just need to get done. Like, where's that balance? Yeah, I think that's the real struggle, because especially with, and I mean, I'm only in my 30s, so I can't talk, but like people in their early 20s coming into my team or my company, just want to be pandered to in every single way, it feels like, and you always have to like tiptoe around their feelings, and they're very expressive about their feelings. But actually, sometimes a job just needs to be done, and you just need to be told you've done the wrong thing, and that's it. And like, you need to toughen up. So where's that balance? I don't think you can always be loving and caring and kind. It doesn't necessarily help.
Well, exactly. But first you have to give them an opportunity, right? And there's a really beautiful model that I teach my clients called pace, lead. And that's pacing someone to their experience. And I can't go fully into the model, but this is how I help people with feedback, is pacing them to where they're at, giving them another pace. So you're helping to give them 2 rounds of compassionate feedback. And then the next part is lead. pace, lead. So that's a real stretch feedback. Like, I need to see this from you. Otherwise, we'll be having a conversation in 2 weeks about it. But first, you've got to give them compassion and help them to develop themselves. Then you've got to check in how they went with that so that they understand the learning, so that they've got you to be able to understand what it is that they need to go get to the next level. And if they aren't able to have that second conversation where they're really just not taking action, they're really not progressing, then there's some lead feedback. So there's different types of feedback. Does that make sense, Fleur?
Yeah, so there's patience involved, which I get. All need a bit of patience. But sometimes time is of the essence as well.
Totally. So if I could just speak to that, it's setting up the expectation at the beginning. You're like, call it hustle phase, call it whatever it is, and opening up the frame and saying to them, okay, this is the hustle phase. This is what we need to achieve. I'm going to be giving you direct and immediate feedback during this time that might be really hard to hear, and it might be really hard to take it on board. And I'm asking you in this situation to be able to sit with that emotion and be able to take action regardless, because this is what we're here to achieve. Is everybody okay with that? Does everybody understand why this is important? Does that make sense? So you're setting up the frame before the hustle phase. So that's for short time frame feedback. And in a bigger overview picture, when you're having one-on-one conversations with people, then you know that you've given them a pace, and then you put the pressure on and you say, this is a lead feedback, this is what I need to see, otherwise there will be consequences. Thanks for chipping in there, Fleur. And I also know this is, of course, feedback and humans. It's all very malleable and nobody is getting it right all the time. But as long as you can understand the mindset, how that really radically transforms the way that you're giving feedback. And I'll share with you something that really helped me. Feedback is broken into 2 words, feed and back. And to feed is to nourish, and back is reciprocation. So if you think about feedback as reciprocal nourishment, it's about you as the leader who can see the big picture, who can see everything in front of you, being able to nourish your team members. And then that also creates the reciprocation, because as you nourish your team members, they start to then also give you feedback because you're open to it and because you've got an open attitude around feedback. So reciprocal nourishment is it's a necessity. We all need to be nourished. Life is about green and growing, not ripe and rotting. So as long as we can give that feedback in a way that we understand it's our responsibility as a leader to nourish the people around us, then we can step into that feedback with the certainty that it really matters. And sometimes we get that feeling in our tummy, like, I really don't want to give this person this feedback. But what I've noticed, especially working with business owners, is that when they conform to that feeling and they don't give the feedback, they're energetically protecting that team member from growing. And not everybody's going to be happy all the time. And everybody's growing up in different environments where feedback was maybe seen as criticism. But once you can create an environment that values feedback, and once you can have those one-on-one conversations with people and understand where they're at with taking on feedback, then it gets easier. And we also need to make sure that that knot in your tummy isn't stopping you from giving the feedback, because that is what's going to really create the growth within the team for them to continue to upskill. Cool? Awesome. So who's recognizing that learning these skills is really going to, or learning this model is really going to help them in their own leadership journey? Fantastic. That's really, really good to hear. And I'm going to share with you really quickly how else you can use this model. So, for example, in a feedback conversation, before you go into the feedback conversation, you're asking yourself, what are the outcomes? So that goes back to the environment. What are the outcomes that you seek? Then you ask yourself, what does this team member need from me? What kind of structure that can we create for this team member for them to be able to transform? The next part is, what are the limitations for them taking action? Do they need some support around that? And what kind of habits can they create for them to be able to continue to show up and develop themselves? And the last part, the last quadrant, is people. And people is connecting your team members to either a mentor or somebody that does that already really well. Or maybe even asking the team member, who do you know in your outside world who's really good at achieving X, Y, Z? So you're helping the team member to connect to somebody that already does that really well so that they can gain a reference in their mind. So not only can you use the critical alignment model for yourself and for your business, but you can also use it when giving feedback and going into those challenging conversations. You can also use it when you are in a meeting. How do you run a meeting? What are the outcomes? What do you need to consider? What are we doing here? And who's involved? So there's so many different layers, and I trust that this was a really vital part of you being able to have structure within your mind so that you can go forward with confidence, so that you can build that clarity within yourselves that's going to help your team members to transform. So last little bit, I'd love to hear, what are your biggest takeaways? What are you loving? What are you learning today that you really want to take forward and implement for you as a leader and take it into your organization? A lot of people typing away there. What's your biggest key takeaway today? What is a commitment that you can make to yourself? Maybe a little mini goal of how this looks moving forward. So one of my clients, she has been working with me for 6 months, and she said to me the other day, I would have never have thought that I would be able to give feedback like this, because I've role played with her. She understands the model, and now she's using it in everyday life to be able to help develop her team. And I love that feedback because she never thought of herself really as a leader, but now she's really stepping into her confidence, into her power. Camilla said, love the part about feedback. It made me think about how I deliver feedback and transform my own ways of giving feedback. Awesome, Camilla, love that. All of the parts consolidated together will help a lot. Nice one. Thank you so much, Maria. And biggest takeaway from Fionn is that she needs to improve her own structure with her own goals that will positively benefit my role within the company. Love it. Nice one. And James said, coming back to a framework that can be used for transforming the charity and building the team and owning their path and participating in the mahi. Yeah, James, that's awesome. Hey, it's been such a delight to meet all of you, to have you here on this webinar today. And as a gift from me for you participating in today's webinar, I do offer a free 1-hour strategy session to understand how this applies to you in your own personal and business situation, and dive a little bit deeper into creating a plan for you as a leader and how you can develop that confidence and clarity within you. Normally, I have a $250 charge for this. However, this is my gift to you today to be able to take away some really solid points and work with me on how you can implement them in your life so that you've got some tangible results from today's webinar. I'm going to be sharing a link in the chat, and you can use that link to be able to book in for your Lead Like a Legend strategy session. So go ahead and jump onto that link, book in a time with me, and I'd love to dive deeper into understanding your personal situation and how we can rock out and be even more legends, to be able to inspire our teams to develop the peace, love, and joy within our organization, because we are steering everybody on the same boat with a beautiful structure, a really nice environment, and understanding how you as a leader can be more effective and implement all of these things for your teams. I've been working as a leadership coach for the last 3 years, and what I really, really appreciate is that everybody who is on this leadership journey is continuing to grow and develop within themselves, and the ability to press pause on life, to have a coach or mentor, somebody to cheer you on and help to reflect things back to you, how vital that is, because we cannot see outside of our own minds. We all have our own filters, our own limitations, our own limiting beliefs, and being able to have somebody to support you on the journey, just how invaluable it's been for me, and wanting to give that gift back to others. So thanks so much, everybody. Happy Wednesday, and I look forward to connecting. See you next time. Goodbye.
Thank you, Danny.
Thanks, Maria. See you, ladies and men.